Hello, I'm Chris Slight, the editor of International Construction, and in this podcast we're going to look at the latest set of financial results from the major stock market listed construction equipment manufacturers in Europe and the US. If you're wondering why we're not covering Japanese manufacturers, it's because the Japanese fiscal year runs to the end of March, so their annual results aren't expected for 3 months or so. We looked at a group of 9 major companies and we've isolated the results for their construction equipment businesses. For example, the figures for Caterpillar exclude its engine business and sales of financial products. For C&H we've only looked at construction equipment and not agricultural machines, and so on. Given how difficult the global economic situation was last year, annual figures for these manufacturers don't look too bad. Sales increased just over 10% compared to 2007, but operating profits fell by about a quarter. That meant that their operating margin, profits as a percentage of sales, was weaker in 2008. But at 7.26%, the margin was still reasonably healthy, although the days of a 10% plus margin are a distant memory now. These overall figures hide a big variance in performance. For example, here are the 3 most profitable companies last year, and Atlas Copco CMT and Metso Minerals actually made slight improvements to their operating margins in 2008. One point to note is that these are among the more specialised companies we looked at, and it's reasonable to conclude that their specific niches, the lifting and mining equipment markets, held up better than general construction markets last year. The list of the 3 least profitable companies in the sector bear this out, with C&H, Volvo and Terex, 3 broad-ranging construction equipment suppliers, at the foot of the profitability table. Like the strong performers, Terex is also in the mining equipment and crane markets, and this actually bears out the strength of these 2 niches last year. Without the profits from its crane and mining businesses this year, Terex would have made an operating loss of more than $300 million. So that was the year as a whole, and given all the economic bad news, it has to be said that the results were reasonable. Sales grew, and although profits were down, all the companies we looked at did make an operating profit in 2008, and the margin of 7.26% was a reasonable one. But the fact is that the market turned very sharply in the autumn, and the last few months of the year were tough. An analysis of fourth quarter results illustrates this. In the last 3 months of 2008, revenues for our group of companies were more than 6% lower than in the same period in 2007. More strikingly, the industry's profitability was wiped out in the final quarter of 2008. Instead of the near 10% operating margin seen in the fourth quarter of 2007, the industry as a whole had an operating loss of $240 million in the last 3 months of 2008. As with full year results, the operating margins for Atlas Copco CMT, Manitowoc Crane Group, Metso Minerals and Sandvik Mining and Construction all remained strong in 2008, up in double-digit territory, although it has to be said that all saw their margins fall compared to the final quarter of 2007. But these were outweighed by 4 companies' losses, most notably Terex and Volvo Construction Equipment. Surprisingly, Caterpillar also had a small loss for its machinery sales in the final quarter of the year, although as a whole the company made a profit of $457 million in the quarter, thanks largely to its engines business. All the companies we looked at in this podcast are expecting lower sales and profits this year compared to 2008. Costs will be cut, and unfortunately that means a lot of job losses around the world. It will be a tough year, and there are likely to be bankruptcies in the industry, as well as mergers and acquisitions. We will be reporting back on this sector throughout the year. If you're interested, keep your eyes open for our April podcast on the Yellow Table, International Construction's ranking of the world's 50 largest construction equipment manufacturers. This will be accompanied by an in-depth report in the April edition of the magazine, and you can arrange a subscription to the magazine through our website, www.khl.com. Thanks for listening.